College football fan bases, they're rabid, but they're also somewhat unreasonable and illogical at times, we know. Bring in Brittnee Taylor Newman of football.com to talk about three fan bases that could be putting a little pressure on their coaches this year. They're ready to win big games and win now. Maybe these coaches are in decent shape in regards to the administration, the athletic director, but the fan bases may be a little, what's the word, Brittnee? Antsy for some wins?
Yes, fancy.
So who do we have in line that you're looking across the country and saying, the coach better win? The fan bases are looking for that next move up the chain.
Well, I think the first coach that you would look at would be Butch Jones at Tennessee. He started there in December of 2012, and he's had two consecutive recruiting classes that were ranked in the top 10. So there is talent that's being pulled back into that Tennessee locker room, which is exciting, of course, for fans. But with the excitement, of course, comes a little bit of impatience. You start getting to a point where you're ready to start seeing the results from those recruiting classes coming in. His first year, he went 5-6 there as a 5-7 in his first year, and then 7-6 in his second year. For the first time in a while, they are actually a contender in the SEC East this year, which of course is exciting for their fans. They haven't won that division since they shared it with Georgia in 2007. And they do have a quarterback who stepped in about halfway through the season last year, Joshua Dobbs. He played the last 5 games of Tennessee's season. Of course, they won 4 of those games. He can run, he can throw, he is smart. He's an aerospace engineering major, and is somebody who created a little bit of buzz this week at SEC Media Days, got a little bit of attention. So the Tennessee fan base is definitely ready and excited about the prospects that they've got with the new quarterback, about some of the other recruits that have come in, and they're ready to kind of start seeing the results. They've been patient through 2 years. So certainly, as we said, some of these coaches we're talking about today aren't in any danger of losing their job anytime soon. But Tennessee fans are a rowdy bunch for sure. They love their football, and they are really, really ready to see the fruits of their patience and their labor. I think the games that you've got to watch out for this season with Tennessee, they've got an out-of-conference contest with Oklahoma in week 2 that'll be a good game. Back-to-back matchups with Georgia and Alabama in October. They're actually playing that game in Tuscaloosa, and then Missouri in November. So those, I think, will kind of be some key games that will kind of tell us where Tennessee's at this year, and hopefully they'll win enough of those to keep the fan base hanging on as they continue to build in the Butch Jones era in Tennessee.
Yeah, I think the Oklahoma game's a measuring stick. Obviously, you don't have to win that to win the SEC. It's a non-conference game, but it's definitely a measuring stick against a team that Tennessee lost to by about 3 touchdowns last year on the road. If Butch Jones, let's say, doesn't win to the fans' expectations at Tennessee this year, I will be the first one in line to say, hang on, let's calm down a little bit, because I think, as you mentioned, Tennessee's been out of the running for the SEC Eastern Division for now 7-8 years since Philip Fulmer left. It's been pretty dismal there. I know that the tradition's rich. The fan base is huge. They pack out over 100,000 for the games, and they're seeing the slow climb right now. The 5 wins, the 7 wins, as you mentioned, top 5 recruiting classes that usually spell good things eventually. But going from, let's say, 7 wins to 10 wins in the SEC is a difficult task, because you beat up on Kentucky and Vandy and those schools to get your 7 wins, and the 3 or 4, let's say they had the 3, I believe, in conference. Yeah, 3 and 5 last year. But then to make that next move, then you're starting to run into some like top 15 and 20 teams. And so that's a pretty big jump. So we'll see what Tennessee's able to do against Oklahoma, and I think that's going to serve as a measuring stick for the rest of the season in the SEC. So elsewhere in the SEC, we have a team that is used to winning, but maybe not winning as much as the fan base would like, and after winning 9-10 games a year, they would like to see a championship thrown in there.
Yes, the second coach that I think we'll have to keep an eye on this season is the perennial hot seat holder, Richt at Georgia. As you said, he's been there for a while. He's been there for 14 years. He was hired in 2001. Enjoyed very quick success early on, which I think has been part of his problem. You know, they've held the division title 6 times, or held it or shared it, won it or shared it 6 times in the 14 years that he's been there. They won the conference in 2002 and 2005. So we're going on a decade now since Georgia has been able to win the SEC. But at the same time, in those 14 seasons, he's coached them to 9 seasons that were 10 wins or more. So this is a team that is consistently good, used to winning, definitely a fan base that is hungry for a national championship every single year. And I think they're tired of being the bridesmaid and never the bride, of playing second fiddle over the last 10 years to the Alabamas, the Auburns, going back a little bit further, the LSUs and the Floridas, and they're really, really ready to be able to win the conference again. I think the peak of that probably came last year when the SEC East was so wide open. There was such a stark contrast between the 2 divisions last year, and it really, really looked like the title was just going to be handed to Georgia for that division until they ran into Florida at their annual game in Jacksonville and were routed by a Florida that was currently 3-3, and then Missouri ended up taking the division title. I think that moment where they really thought they had a clear path and then lost to a 3-3 Florida team in that huge matchup for them, I think that was sort of the height of their unrest last year. And like I said, Georgia fans love Mark Richt. He's done so well there. They are consistently good. But you do see every year the chatter grows a little bit louder and a little bit louder, and this team, these fans, are really, really, really ready to be contending for a conference championship every single year. And they want to be in a playoff spot.
The height of the unrest comment. That was more eloquent than I would have put it. So I will capture that one. But I think that really, again, captures the unrest, as it were, with Georgia, because, as you mentioned, they're typically considered the most talented team, and they go out and they win over the course of years the most consistently over some of their SEC Eastern Division rivals. But look at last year. Last year, Missouri goes to the championship game. Georgia beat Missouri head-to-head 34-0. Most people would say that that was a decided victory and Georgia's the better team, but they couldn't take care of business elsewhere, specifically against arch rival Florida. So frustration in Georgia. And when we talk about what fan bases are going to expect and demand out of their coaches, obviously that varies from team to team. And when we're talking about so-and-so needs to win, well, that's a different level at each school. And for Georgia, they do win. It's, you got to win championships. We've seen you win the 9 or 10 games, and you ran down the list of division championships, but it's been 10 years in winning the SEC. They probably had the unfortunate year in 2012 of most likely being the second best team in college football, but they ran into Alabama and lost by, whether you say 1 play or 4 yards or a couple seconds or whatever it was, or they would have probably dusted Notre Dame in the championship game. So that's the plight of Mark Richt. You win 9 or 10 games, but you got to win the key games at the right time. And then let's step outside the SEC, because there's a coach out in the Big 12 where they're used to winning and winning big. And it's been a long time. It's been since going to the national championship game against Alabama in 2009. And really, Texas, other than being the name Texas, has been completely off the national radar.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie Strong is in a little bit of an awkward position there. Obviously, he's still got some time to buy as well. He raised eyebrows last year when he arrived at Texas by cleaning house. He made it very, very clear that if you were not on board with his principles, you would be out. He suspended 9 players. It felt like as soon as he walked right through the front door. And there was a little bit of people weren't really sure about that in the beginning. They bought into Charlie's tactics. They waited out the year. They went 6-7 last year. But Texas fans, I feel like, more than some other fan bases, are very clear about their expectations for winning and their expectations for winning quickly. I think they may be one of the less patient fan bases in college football. So they're going to be looking to start seeing results. Now, the tricky thing, I think nobody expected Texas to be a contender for a conference title last year, and even this year that would very, very much be a stretch. They lost 6 players, 6 seniors from their defense last year. All spring and summer, they still were in a little bit of a quarterback battle. I think most people assume that Tyrone Swoops, who I believe is a junior, will end up being the starter, but he was in a battle with Jared Hurd, and that's just about to be cemented. And then his leadership role in the locker room will still have to be cemented. So between filling some of those holes from players who have left and the new QB, or the this year's starting QB, kind of establishing his leadership role in the locker room without question, there's a lot still to be done for Texas's team this year. And the tricky thing about that conference now is that the fan base, the last bout of winning that they experienced was in a conference that looked a little bit different. You didn't have the emergence yet of the TCUs and the Baylors, and even to some extent like the Texas Techs, who are pulling from that same rich recruiting pool in the state of Texas. For so long, Oklahoma and Texas were the 2 big names, and now that same pool there in Texas is being pulled out from all of these other schools that have begun to emerge. So recruiting and winning in that conference and in that region just aren't as simple and clear-cut as they were during the Mack Brown era. But I think this is one fan base that is very, very much ready to be winning again. And unfortunately, I think of the 3 coaches that we looked at today, Texas is probably in the biggest hole to get back into that winning rhythm. And I think Charlie Strong has the shortest measuring stick of patience for improvement. So for him, he's not in danger of losing his job anytime yet, as we said, but this fan base is really, really ready to see results. And they've got some really great games coming up this year. I think the ones that you want to look out for them, they open at Notre Dame. And they've got their annual contest against Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry game. It's such a tongue twister. And then obviously the games against TCU and Baylor and Kansas State, those games. So those are the ones that Texas fans, he may not have a winning season, but they want to see an improvement on last year to be sure.
Okay, agreed on all accounts, and I think what makes it difficult for Texas fans, in addition to what you stated, is outside the conference now is Texas A&M. And even though they haven't won big, they've stolen that rock star image from Texas. They've almost taken over the state thanks to Johnny Manziel, thanks to Kevin Sumlin. They've built up the big upgrades to the facilities and the football stadium, and they're kind of the chic school in the state suddenly, and little brother has taken over, and that's difficult for them to take as well. And it doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon because Texas A&M has racked up some rather impressive recruiting classes and should be winning bigger than they have in the last couple of years. Okay, I'm going to throw a couple names at you, or 6 or 7. I went a little crazy here. That is what you get for asking me to jump in here. Bob Stoops at Oklahoma, and it's almost a Mark Richt type situation where he wins consistently 9-10 games, but they're expecting championships. He did it early in his career, won a national championship, went to 4 national championship games, but recently it's been big disappointment in big games for Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. Will he lose his job if he goes 8-4? No. The fan base, though, very testy in Norman. Bret Bielema at Arkansas, that seems a bit ridiculous because he's on the upswing. Went 3-9, then 7-6, and they finished really well last season. But if they stall at 6 or 7 wins, again, he's safe, but I think the fan base is expecting the big jump, i.e. what you're talking about with Butch Jones at Tennessee. Frank Beamer, Virginia Tech, he's kind of an institution, a Bobby Bowden, a Joe Paterno, so he's not going anywhere. But Virginia Tech's kind of he built that program. He was the Bobby Bowden of Virginia Tech. He built that into a national power, but they haven't finished in the top 20 in the last 5 years since 2011 now, and they've become a 6 or 7 win football team, and I think the natives are a little bit restless there. Les Miles, LSU. I know that LSU is a marquee name, and we expect them to win, but they've lost 3-5 games the last 3 seasons, and LSU wants to win and compete with Alabama for that division championship, and they consider themselves equals with Alabama, and that hasn't been the case for the last 3 years. Mike Riley at Nebraska. It's his first season, but they got sick of Bo Pelini losing 4 games a year. He's probably going to lose 4 games this year, even though he brings a different culture, different mindset. He's more likable. He's going to have a honeymoon, but Nebraska expects to win. They consider themselves elite, but they haven't been elite for quite some time. And lastly, I'm going to Iowa and Kirk Ferentz, and we don't think of Iowa as being a major player, but there was a time and place where Kirk Ferentz had them battling in the top 10 most years, and it's been since 2009 that they won the Orange Bowl and tied for the Big Ten championship, and since then they've basically been a 500 program, and that's been a long time away, 2009. So, but Butch Jones, Mark Richt, Charlie Strong, I totally agree. Fan bases a bit restless. They should be in decent shape, but if we're looking a year from now at the same results, then they could be firmly on the hot seat at that point.
Absolutely. This is sort of the year to keep yourself out of that conversation. If you don't want to actually be in the hot seat having uncomfortable conversations with an AD this time next year, or next spring rather, you need to start winning now. And if you want to keep the fan base with you. And one more I think that I would throw in with the group that you just mentioned would be Miami. I mean, it's been a while since they've been contenders for anything, and the AD has continued to stick with the coach, but at some point you got to wonder what year is going to be the year when it's finally a little bit too much.
Miami's a great pick. I forgot Al Golden. Since he came into a mess of a situation, he weathered the storm, but now they've been free of that for a few years. He has the best talent in that division, and they're surrounded by the Dukes and North Carolinas of the world that don't expect to win in football. And the likes of Duke going to the ACC championship 2 years ago, he's not been able to do that. He's coming off a 6-7 season. I think Miami and Al Golden's a good pick there for both maybe the restless fans and the administration, both getting a bit restless there. If they slug it out for another 6-6 type season, he could be in trouble as well. Football.com is where you can find Brittnee Taylor Newman. She writes some great stuff there and usually brings something like this to the table that makes me think a little bit. So I got to take some notes and try to keep up with her. So Brittnee, thanks so much for stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. We'll talk to you soon.